All right, so let me just throw up my share screen there and we can get started. Well, it's a smaller group this time, which is yeah, it's still great. We'll have an opportunity to chat with each other and listen to our guest speakers. So let me just share this. Um, yeah, everyone can see the presentation there.
Mark,
Got nodding. Yeah.
just before we start, oh, okay, yes, Tessica is here. Wait, never mind.
Okay. All right, so yeah, welcome everyone. So today's event is being recorded so that we can share it with the folks who were not able to attend. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. And we're trying something a little bit different this time. My co-host Monica and I are going to switch between English and French. So to follow along in the language of your choice, we are providing a complete transcription in the link, a link in the chat, so you should be able to see that. And as well, our colleague Tessica from CNAC is also here to provide a summary translation in the chat. Monica, did you want to do that section in French, then we'll switch to the land acknowledgement?
Sure. Alors, bonjour tout le monde, je suis Monica. Comme Marc a dit, cette séance est enregistrée aujourd'hui afin que nous puissions la partager avec les personnes qui n'ont pas pu y assister. Mais veuillez noter que les discussions en petits groupes ne seront pas enregistrées. Marc et moi allons co-animer en anglais et français, moi en français et lui en anglais. Et nous avons partagé le lien à la transcription complète dans le chat si jamais vous souhaitez suivre le texte en même temps en anglais ou français. Également, notre collègue Tessica offrira des résumés traduits dans le chat pour la durée de la séance. Et pour les discussions en petits groupes, nous aurions un groupe parlant juste en français et vous y sera placé, si vous l'avez noté, dans l'inscription. Sinon, ou si vous n'êtes pas certaine, veuillez nous indiquer ça dans le chat maintenant. Alors, vous pouvez juste écrire français ou French, mais nous avons déjà comme à peu près 6 noms pour le groupe en français.
Thanks, Monica. All right, so CNAC is headquartered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe in Ottawa, Ontario. Our organization is currently led by white settlers, and we have imposed a settler colonial way of being with the land because our programs were not co-created with Indigenous people. We are committed to repairing our relationship with Indigenous communities by dismantling harmful practices, changing the way we operate, and co-creating programs. This land is at the heart of everything we do at CNAC, so I would like to personally give thanks to this land for teaching me and nurturing me and giving me a place to live, work, laugh, and play. Yeah, and then we'll just go to the, Monica, you can do the French version.
Alors, CNAC a son siège social sur le territoire non cédé des Algonquins Anishinaabe à Ottawa, en Ontario. Nous reconnaissons également que CNAC, notre organisation, est actuellement dirigée par des colons blancs et nous avons imposé une manière coloniale d'être avec la Terre parce que nos programmes n'ont pas été co-créés avec les peuples autochtones. Nous nous engageons à réparer notre relation avec les communautés autochtones en démantelant les pratiques nuisibles, en changeant notre mode de fonctionnement et en co-créant des programmes. La Terre est au cœur de tout ce que nous faisons à CNAC, alors nous remercions la Terre de nous enseigner et nourrir et de nous donner un endroit où vivre, travailler, rire et jouer.
Merci. Yeah, so my name is Mark St. Dennis. I'm mixed race Métis on my father's side, French on my mother's side. Like I said, I live, work, and play on Algonquin Anishinaabe territory in what is now known as Ottawa, Ontario. I'm a father and a husband and an explorer. And
Alors bonjour, je m'appelle Monica Goodluck. Je suis située sur le territoire traditionnel des Wendat, des Anishinaabe, des Haudenosaunee, des Métis et des Mississaugas de la Première Nation Crédit, ici nommée Toronto. Je suis une femme noire, race mixte, cisgenre. Je suis une nouvelle animatrice en observation active, alors une nouvelle animatrice avec CNAC. Je suis mère de 3 enfants, jeunes enfants, et mes origines sont de l'Afrique et de l'Europe, et j'ai appris mon français dans mon enfance à Montréal. Merci.
So today's event is part of a 3-year community consultation project we are undertaking with support from the Lawson Foundation. Our goal is to meet with Forest and Nature School practitioners so that we can articulate as a community what a quality forest and nature school in Canada looks like, sounds like, and feels like, improve our professional learning courses, and set the stage for representing forest and nature school sector in discussions around policy and systems change. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities have been learning from this land and teaching their children on the land since time immemorial. This project is not meant to advise or in any way regulate Indigenous communities. This project is specifically designed to address settler organizations who are operating forest nature schools on Indigenous land.
Alors, cette séance fait partie d'un projet de consultation communautaire de 3 ans que nous entreprenons avec le soutien de la Fondation Lawson. Notre objectif est de rencontrer les praticiennes et praticiens de l'École de la nature afin de pouvoir articuler en tant que communauté à quoi ressemble ce qu'on entend et ce qu'on ressent en vivant une école de la nature de qualité au Canada, d'améliorer nos cours d'apprentissage professionnel et de préparer le terrain pour représenter le secteur des écoles de la nature dans les discussions sur les changements de politique et de système. Next slide. Depuis des temps immémoriaux, les communautés des Premières Nations, des Métis et des Inuits apprennent de la terre et enseignent à leurs enfants sur la terre. Alors, ce projet n'a pas pour but de conseiller ou de réglementer les communautés autochtones du tout. Il est spécifiquement conçu pour s'adresser aux organisations de colons qui opèrent des écoles de la nature sur ces terres autochtones.
The Fireside Chat series is a virtual space for forest and nature school practitioners to meet, share experiences, and answer questions related to a theme. During this Fireside Chat, we are going to dive into 4 principles of forest and nature school practice, which were developed in 2018, and how they relate to our relationship with power. We want to learn from you what these principles look like on the ground, how we can measure the principles, what are the measurements, and how do we know a forest and nature school program is meeting these principles, and is there anything missing? Our hope for the conversation is to have a lively discussion about quality practice in forest and nature school. We, that is CNAC, are not here to judge anyone's practice or be critical. I hope we can all see that everyone here is passionate about forest and nature school, and it is likely that there are differences between us and what we value as essential. I hope we can all keep an open mind and embrace differences of opinion. If you have any questions or thoughts after this, you are more than welcome to share them in whatever way is best for you. This can be video, audio, written, or something else. And send them to community@childnature.ca. You can also complete a survey, which we will be putting in the chat at the end, which will be available on our website as well.
Alors, l'objectif de la discussion aujourd'hui, la série Causerie au coin de feu est un espace virtuel permettant aux praticiennes et praticiens des écoles de nature de se rencontrer, de partager leur expérience et de répondre aux questions liées à un thème. Au cours de cette causerie au coin du feu, nous allons discuter 4 principes de pratique de l'école de la nature élaborés en 2018 et la manière dont ils sont liés à notre relation, les liens avec le pouvoir. Alors, nous voulons que vous nous disiez à quoi ressemblent ces principes sur le terrain. Comment pouvons-nous mesurer ces principes? Quelles sont les mesures? Comment savons-nous qu'un programme respecte ces principes? Et y a-t-il quelque chose qui manque? Alors, nos espoirs pour la conversation aujourd'hui, c'est d'avoir une discussion animée sur les pratiques de qualité dans les écoles de nature. CNAC n'est pas ici pour vous juger votre pratique ou pour critiquer. Nous pouvons tout voir que tout le monde ici est passionné par l'école de la nature et probable qu'il y a des différences entre nous et ce que nous considérons comme essentiel. Et alors, nous espérons garder l'esprit ouvert et accepter les différences d'opinion. Si jamais vous avez des questions ou des idées après cette séance, vous pouvez toujours les partager de la manière qui vous convient le mieux, vidéo, audio, écrit, et les envoyer à community@childnature.ca. Vous pouvez toujours écrire en français ou communiquer en français aussi. Vous pouvez également remplir le questionnaire. Oups, peux-tu retourner? Can you go back, Mark? Vous pouvez également remplir le questionnaire de cette séance qui sera relié au chat et disponible sur notre site web. Merci. Go ahead.
Thanks, Monica. So yeah, now we have the honor and privilege to introduce our three guest speakers. We will be doing this in English only because that is the language of their choosing. So Virginia Lewis, one of our guest speakers, has a huge passion for outdoor education in its many forms and believes children are happiest when surrounded by nature and provided the opportunity to follow their hearts and curiosities. She is founder of Edmonton Forest School, which is a not-for-profit forest and site school in Edmonton. Oh gosh, I'm gonna get this wrong, but I'll try and say it. Ami Squaki Waskakigan, Treaty 6 territory. Before embarking on her forest path, she was a grade 1 French immersion teacher for 8 years who loved exploring the many ways to connect the natural world to urban kiddos. She is a passionate educator who wishes to break down the barriers to risky outdoor play and ensure that every child has access to the fundamental learning that is found on the land.
Thanks. So Adrian Alphonso, using he, him pronouns, is the director of Clear Paths at Momenta. He's driven by adventure, determination, and resilience and takes pride in providing the best cycling programming possible, while easily convincing his audience of the array of physical and psychological benefits that cycling provides. I agree. In addition to his role with Momenta, Adrian has over 10 years of experience sitting on countless committees and boards for both profit and nonprofit groups. Currently, he holds board positions with Trails Manitoba and International Mountain Bike Association of Canada. In 2018, Alphonso was a recipient of the CBC Future 40 Award. Welcome, Adrian.
And Laura Burki has lived her whole life on the west coast of Vancouver Island, right on the edge of beautiful forests and oceans, which has gifted her with an unbounded love for nature. Playing outside, getting muddy, finding creatures, and breathing in fresh air has been an integral part of her life, and she considers it a privilege to be in a position where she can support these experiences for children and their families. Laura is proud to be part of the LGBTQ community on Vancouver Island, holding space for kiddos and their families. All right, Monica, did you want to start with the first question there?
Yeah. So to start things off, we're going to explore the principle that Forest Nature School views children and youth as innately competent, curious, and capable learners and aims to promote their holistic development. So the question that we have to ask of you, Virginia, Laura, and Adrian, is what is the role of children at Forest Nature School? And does this differ from other approaches?
I believe I can start with that. I believe the role of the child in this power dynamic is to show up fully and be present, speak their truths of what they're feeling and experiencing, because that may provide us with direction with where they would like to go. So just two simple things: be present and speak your truth.
Simple and powerful. Sorry, were you going to go on, Adrian?
I think so. I just noticed that how is it different from other approaches? I don't think kids are encouraged enough to speak their truth and or express themselves so that they can feel safe. So this is probably the best place for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Virginia, I see your microphone is off. Maybe Laura's also just not on my screen.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. The role of the child at Forest School is to come with what, just like Adrian said, to come with whatever they're carrying and to just be ready for the day, ready for whatever the path takes us. So whether that's maybe an emotional path, or maybe it's a, a path of energy and excitement, but just being them coming with the way that they are and being happy and joyful. I shouldn't say happy, but us being happy with how they come and supporting them in that is really essential. And I think that I'm going to speak to a little bit of my classical training as a teacher for a public school board. And from other approaches, I find that the child is not encouraged to be the way that they're coming, and to not have kind of the time and the space for them. You just have to kind of push through curriculum, and you kind of just got to go with it. And there's no time for feelings. There's no time for the creative energy that they might be having that day in a certain space, but not getting in another space. So I really love how the kids come, maybe, especially this year with COVID, we've had a lot of kids just, their mental health hasn't been great. And for them to just come in and kind of unwind and connect and be given that space just to breathe and feel how they're feeling, and then maybe work through some of those things, I think that that's really important.
I feel so much more relaxed and refreshed just listening to both of you speak and your answers. Thank you. Did Laura have to go, Mark? I'm not seeing Laura on my screen. Are you there, Laura? We were aware that Laura might not be very
it looks like
available.
Laura had to take off, and that's understandable. We're playing it by ear. She's running a forest nature school herself, and you know, sometimes you just have to go and jump in the mud. So yeah, so the next question then for the two of you is another principle of practice, is that Forest and Nature School is led by an educator who is rooted in and committed to the Forest and Nature School pedagogical framework, its theoretical underpinnings and practical applications. So Adrian, I'll start with you. What is the role of an educator at a Forest and Nature School program?
I may oversimplify it, but I believe that the role as an educator is to listen and provide a safe experience. So that is my role as the wiser person in the situation, who has made the plans and assessed and did all the risk assessments, that I'm providing a safe space for learning to happen, as well as many other things, adventure. But yeah, to listen. I must listen. And yeah, that's only one piece of the question. So that's what I got.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I mean, like, sometimes the simple answer is the most profound one.
Yeah.
Virginia, same question. What is the role of an educator?
I believe that, just like what Adrian touched on, is that our role is to listen, and I think that we do most of the learning. I really believe that I do some of the best learning when they're teaching me things, which is really amazing. So I see it more as, just like Adrian said, like a co-creator, co-player. We are there for most of them, like the safety, that there's only so many times that I really have to jump in with kind of the safety things, especially near the end of the year. But just being there as a guide for safety, I think, would be the biggest thing, and more there just to co-create, learn with them, and play. Like, gosh, play, adventure, and not be worried about all the things that they should be doing, because what they're doing is right. Everything that they're being drawn to and excited about is right, and it's important. And for us to support that and encourage it is the best. Yeah.
Thank you, Virginia. That really resonated with me, especially the learning from the children. In my experience at the forest schools, the kids, they really taught me how to play again, and that was just so amazing. So thank you. Adrian, I'm going to bounce back to you. Can you perhaps share an example of a power imbalance that exists between an educator and a child at a forest and nature school?
It just, from my experience, and I'm going to only speak on my experiences and what I've seen. So the power imbalances are typically on who is the knowledge holder. As an adult, I really must, or educator, I must allow for conversations to happen. And if I want to stick with a curriculum or what I know is best, that's typically where I feel I get my conflicts from. So I have to, again, go back to listening and be part of a co-curation of an experience within the educator and the child experience. It is who actually is the knowledge keeper, and how do we support that? That's all I have for that one.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of pieces that we're balancing and trying to create that sense of co-creation. That can be difficult. Virginia, same question to you. Do you have an example of a power imbalance that has occurred at a forest and nature school?
Yes, I have. I'm gonna, just like Adrian, I'm gonna speak directly to some of my experience. We typically work with kiddos from age 3 to 10, so not a lot of the older teenage years. So kind of the younger realm, and we find a lot of, or I found a lot of power imbalance when we're watching children play, and maybe it's rough and tumble play. I think rough and tumble play has been some of our biggest challenges, is that we have a couple kiddos that really want to play that way, and then we have kiddos that are very nervous about that. And instead of putting myself and saying no to that, and saying, no, we can't do that, how can I encourage it? How can I give space to these kids that are really looking for an outlet to play in this way? So creating boundaries together, finding a way to create a space for them to have that kind of like that power shift, and to have that freedom, and not be led by someone saying, no, you can't do this, or that's not safe because this and this. How can we make this safe, and how can we give you the power to play as you need to play, as safely as possible? And another point, we do do a lot of risky play, and especially with water. We do a lot of risky play with water, and we have had a couple times where we had some safety lines that were crossed a little bit, and then asserting kind of the child wanted to have a little bit more power because they felt so comfortable in the space. So how can we enable them to feel powerful, to feel confident and capable in those situations, and really look at ourselves, take a minute, take a breath, and just say, hey, what am I doing? Is this really the best way to solve this problem? Just, a lot of things that we talk about, is take a breath, see what happens next. Just really give the kids time and space to figure out their not their problems, but figure out what they're looking for, what they're searching for, what are they seeking in that moment that they were maybe pushing a little bit more, or wanting that power dynamic to change. How can we encourage that? So that was really long-winded, I'm sorry. But yeah.
No, that was great. I could listen to the two of you talk forever. I mean, it's again, like everything the two of you say just resonates. And I'm thinking specifically now of my experience with my children, especially my older one who's 4, and how there's that like natural, almost like a compulsion to just say no when he's asking to do something that might be perceived as risky, for example, or even just something that I'm annoyed by, and I just say no. And just like really taking that step back and being like, what's this? Who's this response for? Is it for myself, or is it for my kid? And yeah, I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. Monica, I think you have the next set of questions.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm lots resonating with me, and I'm having like a whole conversation in my head about what I'm hearing from both Adrian and Virginia. So thank you. So here's a big question. So forest nature school programs in Canada operate on and benefit from Indigenous lands, as we know. The next principle of practice we want to discuss is how Forest and Nature School prioritizes building reciprocal relationships with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have been learning from this land since time immemorial. So our question, and maybe Virginia, you can start this time, is as we said, Forest Nature Schools programs operate and benefit from Indigenous lands. How does a settler-run Forest Nature School program share power with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities?
That's a great question. One that I think we're always trying to work on this, and this is probably the hardest question, but also the hardest focus for us right now is to really build that. So I would say having open relationships where we are listening to the communities, to the Indigenous communities. For specifically in our area, it's the Papa Chase Cree people that are on the land that we work on. So opening up conversations, building those relationships, listening. We've had a few elders that have come out to work with us, and just giving them the space and the time to share what they are feeling like they want to share and focus on in that day, and not creating like a curriculum. I want to say like set objectives, and more so just let's just have this time in this space to talk and share and be people, and be present on this land, because that is the most important most important thing. So I'm not sure if that was the right thing, but that's what we're working on currently.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ever a right or wrong thing. I think so long as there's progress and awareness, and you know, like you said, something that you're working on. And I guess the wrong thing would be harmful. So I shouldn't say there is not a right or wrong thing. But thank you. And recognize that people are at different places in their journeys along this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Adrian, can I invite you to answer the question? If you need me to repeat it, I can do so as well.
No, it's clear.
Great.
The question is clear. I think it's worded very well and respectful. And the question itself invites me to feel like I'm trusted, and I trust the question. So good job to CNAC or whoever compiled this in a respectful way. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. This is something that could be extremely uncomfortable. And I think we're within a timeline of Canadian history that we need to feel uncomfortable. So I do have an answer, so let me get to it. So it's about trust and building relationships of trust. If we feel safe, if an organization is showing a First Nations community of accountability, which is a certain step of reconciliation, by looking at the calls to action, and for organizations to create their very own working in a good way documents, and identifying which calls to action they're committed to uniquely, that shows accountability, and that's a stepping process. We are in a time of truth and reconciliation, and the truth is hurting us right now as Indigenous peoples, but it's only hurting because we haven't been heard. Our stories are coming out within arts, song, music, and of course the needs. I believe there's two steps to reconciliation, but they are not within order. there's to be accountability, and I just suggested a very simple way for organizations to do it. But there's also reparations, and reparations are not for every organization. Reparations are for the government, for the church, or whoever else was involved in this genocide and acquisition of land, the dispossession of indigenous people. A reparation would be hashtag land back, but we're not going to be doing that right now. But we will be looking at what we can do to be accountable of not just how we speak of indigenous peoples. We need to stop using erasure narrative when we do land acknowledgements and speaking of peoples and ceremonies as the past. There's millions of indigenous peoples and families every day who identify as Canadian and as indigenous. And often when you employ, I guess, employing Indigenous and First Nations members of the community is reparation a little bit, because you're involving processes and ways of knowledge to better your programming, because Indigenous values take into consideration the whole community as a unit, from infants and children to adults and teenagers to elders. Everybody's considered in the well-being of the health. So when we speak of land, when we speak of education and health and knowledge sharing, and I guess now reconciliation, we need to have more conversations, and we only get there by involving Indigenous peoples and planning and steps forward. I believe I was speaking my truth, and that's my best answer to this. Miigwech.
I'm a little bit speechless. I was like, yes to everything that you're saying, and I also just want to acknowledge, while you showed appreciation for how the question was phrased, I also feel like I could have contextualized it a little bit more within the current context and the current sort of news cycle and the intensity of that, and the intense impact it has to kind of be constantly reminded of the truths that you and other Indigenous peoples have known about and live for generations, and and it continues. So yeah, I just want to own up to that and apologize for that, and also really show deep appreciation for the thought and the labor that you put into your response, and your calls to action on the calls to action that all of us, and particularly those of us who are not Indigenous, and that CNAC can take. There's a lot of really powerful, accurate stuff in there. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. So our next question is about access and equity. We know there is a need to support the development of accessible and equitable experiences for all children at forest and nature schools in Canada. This is why forest and nature school practices, policies, and programming reflect and prioritize the building of engaged, healthy, vibrant, and diverse communities through consideration of access and equity in our decisions and actions. So Virginia, I'll start with you here. How does a high quality forest and nature school program share power with families, caregivers, and communities?
That's a great question, and one that we're always working on. One thing that that I truly believe is that that we need to have more connections and programs where different communities can join and be a part of forest school. So that would be, for us specifically in our context, would be we have a site school that operates with schools all across Edmonton, and then they come to a land, a park, anywhere that's close to them, and then they spend a week in that space learning from the land in a forest school way, and then they go back to their classroom. And this is kind of an educational specialty, I guess, that's happening in Edmonton and Calgary with these immersive site schools, and that allows kids that have not been able to spend time on the land. It gives them the opportunity to connect and build a relationship with the land and a relationship to themselves. Um, and we think that it's incredible. It's probably some of our best work has been not necessarily with the kiddos that are in our forest school programs, that whose family knows about us, are close to our area, and have the means to come to it. We find it so much more incredible and kind of like spirit change, like it's almost like you've been changed by your experience in site school, seeing these kids and their joy and their happiness and the time and the space that they're being given when they're not usually given that space, and seeing how they develop in 5 days. um, we think that that's just incredible, and teaching the teachers how to incorporate this into their everyday um, planning, right? That this is really important to get more people educated in this learning from the land, and allowing children that time in that space. So how can we get all the kids out there, and how can we teach teachers, um, and share that responsibility and that power together, and be a place of support for everyone. And that's something that we're going to be working on forever. So yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Virginia. Yeah, yeah, it's my wife is a teacher, so I know that there's often that struggle of trying to find those resources, not having time because you're spending all of your time just prepping and then teaching, and then trying to get your snack in. So, you know, I think it's really cool that the perspective you bring there is like sharing what you learn in your circles of influence. And I think that's really important, is that we do share the knowledges that we acquire over time. Adrian, same question to you. Let me know if you need me to repeat it.
We're good.
All right.
Thank you. So I'm just going to be focusing on some key words in the question, such as accessible and equitable experiences, as well as how to get high quality programming to communities. So I got maybe 3 quick suggestions and points of conversation. The first one is providing information for the families ahead of time on what objectives might be coming up, or the goals of a forest school program. And for those families to afterwards ask questions. So how do they support that child by telling them what to expect, and as well as how to ask the right questions on allowing them to share about how they retain the experience. This requires ongoing conversations for the caregivers and the child itself, themselves. But I believe in order to be truly accessible and equitable, our very own foresthood practitioners need to be trauma informed. The truth is, we may be serving people who are coming to us who are already in maybe not dire situations, but already with some packages. And if our practitioners can navigate that in a good way, that's how we become a lot more inclusive and a lot more accessible to the benefits of being outdoors and using the land as an educator by meeting those needs specifically. And when you do that, it turns out to be great for everybody, whether they have needs on a different level or not. So that's what I have for that. Thanks.
Yeah, miigwech, Adrian. Yeah, that's a really interesting point that I hadn't considered before, being trauma informed. And it also reminds me too of something you were saying earlier, and I think the previous question about how trust is so integral to that power sharing, and that it seems like it's almost impossible to share power if you can't trust. So it's the responsibility for creating that trusting environment is something that that us in the sector, the Forest and Nature School programs and organizations need to work on. Yeah, so thank you to Adrian and Virginia so much for joining us as guest speakers. We're now going to be moving on to the breakout rooms, and Adrian and Virginia will be in one of them. So we'll find out. We're going to get thrown into those random rooms, but it'll be fun. And so let me explain a bit about that, so we all have a sense of what will happen. So we're going to divide up into facilitated breakout rooms. That means that there will be someone their CNAC staff member who will be asking the questions. And we're going to discuss in the first room, how does a forest and nature school program show that they believe children are competent, curious, and capable learners? So what we're looking for here is specific and concrete practices that programs use to support this view of the child. Each breakout room has already been assigned a facilitator, like I said, who will take notes on the conversation. And then after the breakout room, we will bring everyone back and we will ask for the facilitators to share a summary of their conversation. We will likely not be able to hear from everyone. Well, we might this time because we have less of a crowd. But in the case that we can't hear from everyone, we will have all of the written notes collected, which will then be part of the community consultation process. So all of it comes back feeding into the quality indicator. So thank you so much. The breakout rooms will last for about 15 minutes. I will invite Monica to share this in French as well. Oh, you're muted, Monica.
I know, just switching screens. Luckily, Zoom reminded me. Just as I was trying to say, a reminder that the breakout rooms are not recorded. Alors, nous allons maintenant vous diviser dans des petits groupes pour discuter le suivant. On veut vraiment discuter comment un programme d'école de la nature montre qu'il croit que les enfants sont des apprenants compétents, curieux et capables. C'est-à-dire, on recherche ce sont quoi les pratiques spécifiques et concrètes que les programmes utilisent pour soutenir cette vision d'enfants comme compétents, curieux et capables. Après la discussion, nous ramènerons tout le monde dans la grande salle et nous allons demander un petit résumé de votre animatrice ou animateur. Alors, chaque salle aura aussi une animatrice ou un animateur qui va être en train de prendre des notes de votre discussion. Les groupes vont durer à peu près 15 minutes. Les discussions ne sont pas enregistrées. Et même si votre groupe n'est pas capable de faire un petit rapport, nous aurions les notes qu'on a prises, le texte, qui vont être toutes collectées et envoyées à SINAC pour analyser. I think that's it. Si vous avez voulu être dans un groupe, si vous trouvez que vous êtes dans un groupe anglophone, mais vous préférez d'être dans un groupe francophone, vous pouvez retourner à la salle, puis on peut vous remettre. So I was just saying, if you end up in an English-speaking group and you prefer to be in a French-speaking group, you could just leave that room and come back and we'll put you in the right group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just a heads up to the breakout room leads. We were originally planning for more rooms, so it's going to be myself, Natalia are going to be co-leading, and then Cameron, Busola, and Marani, you're also going to be co-leading a room, and then Monica, you'll be in the French room. So go ahead, Charlene, and send us off. All right, well, welcome back, everyone.
It's always that like, we've
Monica,
got 1 minute left.
There you
Hurry.
go. There you are, Monica.
I'm here.
I was worried that you were still stuck in the breakout room and that was it.
It was a great breakout room, so if I was stuck in there, that would have been completely fine. But that's how these discussions go. They're fast and rich. And on that note, we'll ask for. Should we start with a little summary from Cameron and Natalia? Were you in the same group? No.
No.
Okay, Cameron, you unmuted first, so go for it.
Damn. No.
Hit the button first.
Yeah.
Like Family Feud.
Yeah, like Family Feud. Well, we had a great discussion, and I was actually quite shocked when I saw the breakout room was closing, because we'd only just started that discussion. But what came through and I would invite everyone who is taking part of this to jump in after our summaries, just in case I've perhaps misquoted or left something out important. But one of the things I underlined key words, because I think those really talked about. One was attitude. It is really about a different attitude around the hierarchy of really not putting people up above, but actually bringing us all to a different level with different knowledge and capabilities. But it's really comes with an attitude to number one, as a way of demonstrating it. The other one is that it tied to that is that having conversations. So one of the ways to know that is that you've had conversations, you are having conversations, and that is an ongoing thing. It's not a singular starting point. It is something that happens over time on an ongoing basis. Even things like restating things, asking children, and really showing through words as well as reflections what's heard, said, and seen. So it's often a lot of small practices, but it's done consistently and persistently. That was another one. Another piece that also came up was also the idea of one way to show is actually where the education happens. By virtue of our choices in terms of where Forest and Nature School programming takes place, we are showing the children, we're showing parents, and we're perhaps showing ourselves that we have trust and confidence and in children, and in the idea of creating spaces, or leading them to spaces, I should say, where people they can be curious, they can be confident, and they can demonstrate their activity by things like slippery rocks, babbling brooks, those kinds of things. And then I guess lastly, what I would one of the things that was mentioned was, and a great quote, was this idea about talking about the idea about shifting our behavior and how we position ourselves as educators from being a leader sort of at the front to being an organizer, to facilitating organizational activities in our learning environments, bringing people into that same space. So those were some of the big ideas that came from, among many, that came from our group's discussion. So if everybody, I mean, feel jump in the chat, I suppose, if there's anything I missed or misstated.
You covered a lot, Cameron. How did you all manage that?
Well, what's even funnier is that we hardly even went through the questions. But yeah, we just had some very thoughtful people and some very considerate answers.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for that summary. All right, Natalia, you're up.
All right. I'm always a little nervous to follow Cameron because he's such a great public speaker and has like such a radio voice, but I'll do my best. Very similar themes in our conversation. Something that came up was that we know children are confident, competent, curious, and capable when they actually don't really rely on the educator anymore, when they're kind of able to sit in that space, like really direct their own play and learning, and kind of turn to the educator when they need them, but they're really out there independently on their own. Something else we talked about was actually creating a safe space to fail. That is really important for children to learn, and for that to be modeled actually by the educator. So we talked a lot about how educators are co-learners with the children, and that they are not the experts, and that educators can demonstrate making mistakes, failing, and that's okay, and that children can really learn from that. Offering space for them to problem solve on their own, kind of resisting that urge to jump in, give opinions, direct the play, kind of taking a pause, stepping back, and allowing them to problem solve on their own, asking questions like, why didn't that work? What else could we try? So that they're kind of problem solving on their own, and that they see that they do have the skills and the knowledge and the confidence to problem solve on their own. I'm trying to see what else we had here. Yeah, just kind of following the lead of children, allowing their imagination and creativity to take the lead. If I missed anything, please feel free to jump in. Yeah.
So wonderful. It's so great to hear like overlap and then also different things that groups came from. It's going to be great to collate all of the information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. So, or I guess all, because really they're just the reporting back of all of your voices. So we're going to jump into the next breakout room, and this one is similar question, but there is a slight difference in that the question we're going to be asking in this next breakout room is, how does an educator at a forest and nature school program share power? So this is more at the level of the individual educator rather than the program as a whole. So you can think about perhaps in the relationship between the educator and the child, what are the specific dynamics that are at play, and how does the educator share power with that child or with community?
Say that last part again. Whoops. What was the last thing you said?
How does an educator share power with, with the child or with community?
Community, right. Okay, sorry, that's what I missed.
No worries, yeah, because you're going to say all in French.
Yeah. Alors, nous allons repartir bientôt encore une fois dans les petits groupes et on va plus discuter comment un éducateur ou éducatrice d'un programme d'école de la nature partage le pouvoir. Alors, c'est au niveau individu, peut-être entre éducatrices, éducateurs et enfants ou avec la communauté. Les salles, on y sera pour encore 15 minutes, 15 minutes still, Mark?
Yep.
Yep. And that's it. We're ready to go, I think.
Welcome back, everyone. Sorry, you got cut off there, Jacqueline. You're like making a very good point when.
Oh, I was gonna go up the ladder and then down the ladder. That's all I was gonna say.
That makes reverse scaffolding. It makes sense. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating in that second breakout room. We'll now invite a couple of folks just to share a bit about their breakout rooms in summary. So Petra, are you still here? Yes, you are. Can I call on you to give a short summary of your breakout room?
I just put in the chat that I need to go get Iggy, my son, from camp.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm gonna have to pass the mic to somebody else in our group.
Sure.
But thanks everybody for this. This was great. I'm gonna hop off. Take care.
Bye, Petra. Perhaps Monica, then, can I invite you to share a summary of your breakout room, and please feel free to do so in French. And maybe Julie, can I ask you to provide a translation in the chat? Thank you so much, Julie.
And Julie can also write things in that I missed out. Alors, oui, certainement, le partage de pouvoir est un élément essentiel. C'est la façon de faire, d'être dans les écoles en nature. Ça fait partie des principes, le renversement de pouvoir. Et une des choses qu'on a discuté pendant les 15 minutes, c'est comme, pour partager le pouvoir, il y avait des thèmes. La confiance est important. Alors, la confiance des enfants, la confiance entre les éducateurs, éducatrices et les enfants, ce qui est établi vraiment entre les relations, avoir des bonnes relations, prendre le temps d'avoir des relations entre nous comme adultes et les enfants, avec les parents, avec les structures ou systèmes dans lesquels on travaille, par exemple, les écoles, les conseils scolaires, etc. Alors, s'il n'y a pas une bonne relation, s'il n'y a pas de confiance, le partage de pouvoir n'est pas capable. une des défis, mais une des choses qu'on fait souvent comme adulte, comme leader, c'est vraiment essayer de réfléchir. Alors, réfléchir avant de réagir. Que l'éducatrice, éducateur doit écouter aux enfants, en particulier quand un élève veut du pouvoir. Notre rôle, c'est vraiment de écouter et réfléchir. Pourquoi est-ce que c'est important pour l'enfant? Quels sont les risques et comment assurer leur sécurité? Et comment puis-je, comme adulte, leur soutenir? Alors, au lieu de dire non ou c'est trop difficile, c'est vraiment comment est-ce qu'on donne l'opportunité aux enfants d'avoir le pouvoir. Il y avait quelques petites autres choses. Attends. Voilà, si comme adulte, on prend la décision que vraiment expliquer pourquoi on prend la décision à leur place comme adulte. C'est un respect important. Et que plus on connaît les enfants, plus on peut partager le pouvoir. Alors, quelqu'un a dit, par exemple, que maintenant, comme un programme qui a commencé en septembre, mais maintenant, on le fait plus de confiance parce qu'on les connaît mieux, que c'est tout un processus. Quand on rencontre les enfants pour la première fois, on ne les sait pas, on ne connaît pas leur historique, leur expérience à grimper, à courir, à sauter, à utiliser des utiles, tout ça. Alors, ça prend du temps pour établir des relations avec les enfants et des relations positives. Et le plus qu'on fait ça, le plus on peut partager le pouvoir. Et que c'est toujours un effort comme adulte. Et un dernier point que je veux partager, c'est que les écoles en nature, l'expérience d'être dehors, c'est un espace, c'est une opportunité, un droit où les enfants peuvent vraiment parler et s'exprimer. Et quand on parle de la langue française comme une langue seconde pour beaucoup d'enfants, les enfants prennent plus de risques à parler en français, à s'exprimer en français, dehors, en nature, même sur le cours, que dans une classe où tout est structuré. I'm sure that was a lot for Julie. I had the easy job, but maybe we should have done the reverse.
No, merci beaucoup. Yeah, it's really interesting that a lot of what you said, I think, is reflected in my own group as well, about that relationship and trust and the self-reflection as an educator. So thank you for sharing that. I am conscious of the time right now. We're a little bit past, so I think what we'll do is we'll just we'll go into our closing remarks, and then all of the notes will be collected, like I said, and we'll be able to use that as part of this process for the quality indicators development. So thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, so I do want to say thank you to everyone for participating. And I specifically want to give a huge thanks to our guest speakers, as well as Julie for jumping into the chat there and handling the whisper translation. Very, very much appreciated. And Monica as well for co-hosting with me. And then of course the CNAC team. But most importantly, for everyone for coming and participating and sharing their thoughts and ideas. So just as a reminder, and this is also for the folks who are watching this as a recording, is that we do have a form stack survey, which will be put into the chat, and it will also be in the description of the video that you can go check out. So if you weren't able to attend live, or if you feel like there's more things you want to share, the same questions that we discussed today will be available there, and you can go and give your feedback that way. Yeah, and then the recording of this will be up on our website in the next week or two. And the next Fireside Chat is going to be on the relationship with trust. So this is about kind of the Forest Nature School pedagogy, as well as like inquiry. So trusting a child's inquiry. And that will be on August 31st at 7:00 p.m. Eastern. And then finally, if you ever want to get in touch, we do have an email address that is community@childnature.ca, and Charlene will hopefully be putting that in the chat too. Yeah, thank you so much. Monica, I'd invite you to close us out in French.
Alors, merci tout le monde pour vos contributions et votre participation. Un grand merci à Virginia et Adrian pour tout que vous avez partagé. Merci à mon co-animateur Marc et l'équipe de CNAC. Merci pour l'opportunité de discuter en français et dans notre petit groupe aussi. On veut vous rappeler, Charlene a déjà mis, je pense dans le chat, le lien pour le sondage FormStack. Alors, si vous n'avez pas eu l'opportunité de répondre toutes les questions ou vous êtes en train de regarder l'enregistrement, vous pouvez en ajouter des commentaires dans le sondage de FormStack. L'enregistrement ainsi qu'un résumé des conversations seront disponibles dans les prochaines semaines sur notre site web. Et la prochaine causerie du coin du feu, c'est le 31 août à 19h, heure avancée de l'Est, heure de l'Est, sur le thème « Relations de confiance, la pédagogie et enquête de l'école de la nature ». Et vous pouvez toujours nous contacter à community@childnature.ca. Et tout ça, c'est dans le chat. Alors, un grand merci à tout le monde d'avoir venu aujourd'hui. Thank you to everybody for being here. Wish you a good day tomorrow, however you decide to manage that. On vous souhaite une bonne journée demain and a good start to July and August and hopefully summer and a bit of a break. Une petite pause pour tout le monde.